Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And today, we are going to be talking about an interesting subject, aka the US dollar, and how it is going to most likely collapse. So, let's jump into this. But before, of course, we do jump into this, talking about collapsing, how about you collapse that like button? It does help the channel grow immensely. It does help the YouTube algorithm and things like that. So I will definitely appreciate that if you guys do. Now, with that being said, let's just dive in and let's talk about a few things. So first off, I'm going to be talking to you guys about the US dollar and its declining overall viewpoints. When we take a look at the US dollar currently, we know that its value is actually increasing. But the real question is, for how long will that happen? We're actually going to be talking about that. So first off, we have to talk about the US dollar. May be the next casualty of the Ukraine war. Now, this is actually a recent article, and when we talk about things like this, it is pretty interesting when you look at, the things that have really sparked a debate from, of course, the Russia and Ukraine conflicts. Now, I've talked about this in general for crypto adoption and crypto regulations. I do believe that that is streamlined areas that, of course, this conflict did amount to. But we also do see a growing picture around economic sanctions within the Russia conflict as well around the US dollar. Now, as we do see the US dollar kind of, growing in value, but we also do see the US dollar falling in terms of dominance and also in terms of reserves. Now, why is this? Well, first off, it is because of sanctions. I've always said in terms of the SWIFT network, which we utilize on a day-to-day basis in terms of the legacy systems, it is US dollar dominated. Now, with the SWIFT network, we could utilize the US dollar and the SWIFT network essentially as a financial weapon. These other nations do not like that. They do not want that, so they want to move away from it. Now, as we do see moving away from the US dollar, we will most likely see the US dollar lose not only its dominance, but also lose its pretty much stepping stone as a reserve currency. Now, as we look into things like this, do I believe that these sanctions will most likely lead to these nations pulling out of course, the US dollar? Most likely. And I do see the US, infrastructure in terms of the dollar probably dropping in value as well, as we do see economic growth kind of slowing as interest or inflation rates continue to increase, which I do see them at much higher than the 8.5% that they are letting on. But we also do see Russia's sanctions threaten to erode dominance of the US dollar, and also why the world is cutting down on US dollar reserves. What this is all, again, accounting for them wanting to get away from the US dollar itself. As the US is printing more and more fiat currency, which I've addressed is 80% in the last 2 years, from $4 to $20 trillion. This is pretty significant. 80% of the US dollar in existence printed in the last 2 years. And the printers have not stopped. They are continuing. So as we do look at that, right? Is it really Russia sanctions that is threatening the dominance of the dollar? Or is it the idea of these nations wanting to move away from the dollar because as the US continues to print that money, being a reserve currency actually not only hurts the US economy, but it actually hurts every other nation's economy. We've actually seen the US economy growth, like I've said, slowing, causing economic downturn, but it also caused economic downturn within the England economy, aka the United Kingdom, Canada's economy as well. And this has resulted in a downshift even in third world countries and even countries around the world. Now, this is an issue. Again, this also causes the idea of them wanting to move away from the dollar, cutting down on US dollar reserves, aka weakening the dollar. Now, again, like I've said, in terms of this 80%, print it, 40% of it making, its way into the economy in the last 12 months, this calls for concern when we really kind of see inflation at 8.5% as rent and gas prices have increased 50%. Groceries have increased drastically in percentiles. And when we talk about things happening right now in the world, I would say, things do not look stable in terms of economic growth, especially from the US dollar. We are seeing, many areas around the world move away from the dollar and actually move into the Chinese yuan. We actually do see Israel adds Chinese yuan to a $206 billion reserves in philosophy change, moving to reduce allocation for the dollar and also the euro. Things continue to evolve. This is actually coming from Bloomberg. Now, when we look at this and we kind of address things happening right now in terms of the US dollar growth and dominance, this is most likely going to lead to more downturn within those areas. Now, as you guys are probably wondering, well, all right, you're talking about the US dollar collapsing, dropping. What could we as retail investors really kind of do? Well, I don't want to say just look at, crypto. Look at crypto and also stocks. I mean, if you want to get into stocks, if you know stocks, definitely turn to stocks. I think that risk on assets are going to be the area to really kind of address and watch for, as we do see, again, a lot of interest kind of moving towards crypto and stocks. Now, I do also want to show you guys the dollar. So here's the dollar during its 13.37% decrease in price from it's actually a little bit more, it's like 13.41, from the week of March 23rd, by the way. This is the weekly candles. From March 23rd all the way down to the weekly candle of January 4th. Now, during this time, the dollar dropped 13.41%. It actually rose slightly from those 2018 lows. This candle is actually a little bit, or this line is a little bit off, but it still makes way for the support to actually be there. This actually only allowed from 2018, okay, to roughly around this time frame here. It actually dropped about, more than half of that percentile range that it made up, or the percent range that it made up. Sorry, not percentile, which was about 16.73%. We dropped about 13.41%. So almost right back to, the base point of 2018. Now we look at where we are currently, okay? Now, we might not go exactly down to those 2018 lows to retest, but it would be pretty significant if we did. I would say that economically, we look worse now than March of 2020. But when we take a look at this, if we repeated this same percentage drop at about 13.41, we would just be testing those, January lows, which wouldn't be too bad. Or we could actually kind of increase in price or in value and actually jump up to about like 104 to 105, which would also be testing the highs going back as far as, 2017. Would be pretty interesting to say the least. But when we also look at this, I foresee this most likely being a little bit deeper of a correction than, of course, March 2020, which if this is the case, we could come down and test about 14.21%. Now, when we look at this and we kind of compare and contrast it, why do I talk about crypto a lot? Well, it's pretty simple. We look at the US dollar, and this dropped about 13.41% from, again, the weekly candle of March 23rd to the weekly candle of January 4th. Now, as we did see that, we also seen Bitcoin, right? Now, Bitcoin did experience a little bit of a crashing point. It came down about 71.86%, but then it rallied from the time base that the dollar topped out to the day that the dollar kind of bottomed out, over 644% of an increase in price. Now, again, this did continue to, drastically increase over 1,123%. But when we take a look at things happening right now, we kind of see a repetitive process being printed. And that is, of course, Bitcoin dropping in value over, 52%, while the dollar actually rallied a little bit from those lows. It's currently actually up about 13.41%. Mind you, we pumped about 16.73 before we did crash. If we do kind of repeat that, we would be roughly at around that 104 to 105 area, which is exactly why I've talked to you guys a little bit about that area, if we do kind of continue to drastically increase here. But if we are talking about this, right, it looks very similar to what we have been seeing in the past, more so around that March of 2020 area. Now, do I think that Bitcoin is going to go on a 644% tear? Absolutely not. But that would be roughly around the area of like, say for so $200,000. It might actually be a little bit less, actually, now that, yeah. So this would be like 401. But when we take a look at this and we really kind of address where we could end up, I don't think that we're going to repeat that 644% of an increase in price or even a 400% of an increase in price. What I can see is us actually hitting around like 120, which would be almost 200%, to roughly 160K within that area. So almost 200 to 300%, wherever the sweet spot is in there, would be pretty good. This would take us to about this 2618 to roughly almost a 3618, which is an area that usually gets tested quite a bit in terms of Bitcoin, and it's not too bad of a outreach, especially if we are going off of the topping points, going off of these summer lows. Now, with this in mind, and when we talk about things happening within the economy, what will cause a shift in Bitcoin's price and crypto in general is just buyers running into crypto from, again, the dollar. Once they see this really kind of start to have that massive downtrend similar to the March of 2020 timeframe, that's when a lot of buyer demand will shift into risk on assets, more so stocks and crypto. Now, you don't have to go and buy, Bitcoin again. In terms of Bitcoin, I don't believe that there's a lot of ROI for individuals wanting to invest a little bit. I would say Bitcoin is more so for individuals that have a ton of, capital to invest and risk. Remember, don't stretch your boundaries. Do not overinvest or anything like that. But I do believe that, the dollar plummeting will cause risk on assets to massively increase in price, more so crypto and stocks. Now, as we also see this, what caused the US dollar to increase in value? Well, ultimately, I do believe that the dollar did bottom out, and I think that it was ready for it to kind of have that nice impulse. Also, during 2021, we did see a lot of spending happening from individuals getting stimulus and things like that. That also did account for a little bit of economic growth, but it wasn't really much, and I honestly look at the economic growth as still being slowed and dropping. But it's also the idea that the Fed is hiking some interest rates. We also seen a lot of outlook in terms of the 2 year. Basically them having some high aggressive hikes, and this would cause some confidence growing behind the U.S. dollar. Really, kind of gives you the idea that hey, they're taking charge. They're kind of making some sort of change towards inflation, but it's really not. In fact, these rate hikes during inflationary times, while economic growth is slowed, while we did see 80% of the U.S. dollar printed in the last 2 years, only sparks more of the fire. It's almost like throwing gasoline onto an open fire. It's only going to spark it more. So this is actually not good economically. I mean, sure, does it build confidence? Yeah, slightly. But ultimately, this is not going to end well for the US dollar. And we also did see the US dollar dominance in global divisions will benefit crypto, says Binance CEO. And here's why. And this is more so talking about areas kind of moving into utilizing crypto and moving away from currencies, more so fiat currencies. We do see our money is a very strong tool for governments to influence each other, the geopolitics, etc. The US dollar is one of the strongest tools that the US has, and if it doesn't have that anymore, well, then what is going to happen? That's the issue, right? I believe that tensions within, of course, geopolitics have sparked a debate to kind of move away from, the U.S. dollar, move away from fiat, and kind of move into, crypto-backed currencies. And we do see here, the world is becoming more divided. When the world becomes more divided, guess what? People will tend to try to use the currency as a tool to enforce sanctions and etc. When you do that a lot, people look for a neutral thing to use, which is cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is very neutral. It doesn't belong to any country. No one can mint more of it. There's no inflation. It's the most neutral thing. And then for businesses that want to do business globally, that don't want to get stuck and get their bank accounts frozen by this country, that country, guess what? They will use neutral technology. And of course, we do see here the U.S. has to think about, hey, does this crypto decrease the influence of the U.S. dollars globally? Which it probably does, to be very frank. So the U.S. can fight it for a long time. If you keep fighting it, this thing will develop for the rest of the world. And that's basically what we have been seeing right now. For an example, China, right? China's digital yuan shows why we still need cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Their yuan has been doing very well. We actually do see various Chinese cities and sorry, It's already been piloted in various Chinese cities and was used in more than $8 billion worth of transactions in the second half of 2021. China's efforts have spurred, other, countries to ponder digital currencies of their own. Nearly 90% of countries, accounting for more than 90% of global GDP, are actively exploring a central bank digital currency or a CBDC. This is pretty significant, and it's no surprise, especially when you look at, how fast China has started to grow. Their economy basically could overtake ours by 2030. And this is most likely to be applauded to, the digital yuan. And when we talk about this, right, CBDCs are at the forefront. Now, a lot of people have been saying, CBDCs are not good. And trust me, I do agree with you. A retail CBDC is not good at all, but a wholesale CBDC will actually benefit banks and countries greatly. It moves them away from, again, dominated currencies. But it also allows for streamlined processes of cross-border payments. It allows for a lot more efficiencies to be, really realized. And it actually does spark a massive economic growth because inflationary tools like, again, fiat would most likely take a backseat for a little bit of time. And we do see a lot more of these being proof of concepts, pilots, and actually launching now, which is pretty interesting, especially as we did see this really kind of start to move very, very fast. Now, again, as we do see this, I do think that there's a major shift and spotlight on crypto. And this is also why I do believe that as we do watch the dollar kind of gain momentum, it kind of tells you, hey, where is this going to top out at? And I do believe that we top out around that March of 2020 high to around roughly 105. Now, once we do see that, that's when you really want to pay attention to crypto. Now, again, crypto is not going to take off exactly at the same point that, the dollar really kind of tops out. Like I said, even Bitcoin on the weekly candles really started to gain some momentum at around the week of March 16th. Now, when we talk about that, that's exactly around the time where the US dollar did top out at, but it did also reach that same point the next weekly candle. This is also why I'm watching the US dollar closely to see if it is going to top out at some point in time here soon, because once that does happen, I do believe that crypto is going to go on another bull run, similar to also stocks as well. Stocks will most likely do very good as well once the dollar does start to gain some weakness, as we even did see, again, stocks kind of go on that same rally around the same points that Bitcoin did as well. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe to notifications on if you guys want more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord down in the description below. As always, up to you all. Have a beautiful day or a beautiful night wherever you guys are in this beautiful world. This has been Nick. Peace out, guys.